Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar on building a career with MSF. It's wonderful to be joined tonight by people from across Australia, New Zealand, Asia and the Pacific. I would like, and we would like as MSF Australia, to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. This land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. In recognition that we are a binational association, I also take this opportunity to say kia ora to our colleagues joining from New Zealand. My name is Jackie Clark and I'm part of the international recruitment team with MSF Australia. Please do start sending through any questions you have tonight. We'll answer them after the conversation with our panellists. Do keep in mind we are unable to answer any questions on your individual suitability tonight. Send your questions through the MSF website, YouTube or Facebook page. Tonight we'll be talking about working with MSF over the long term, either through developing a full-time career or the equally valued commitment to an assignment every couple of years or so. We'll also talk about how training and professional development support from MSF helps to support you in your career progression. And to understand how this can work in practice, it's my great pleasure to welcome our two panellists, Dr. Lisa Searle, who has followed the medical route, and Jennifer Craig, the non-medical. Both have significant overseas experience and have moved into leadership roles with MSF. So let me start with a brief introduction to Lisa. She joined us in 2010 as a medical doctor with a special interest in sexual health and refugee health, focusing on women's health with Afghan refugees in Pakistan. And since that first assignment, she has gone on to work in the Democratic Republic of Congo as hospital clinical lead, Haiti, the Central African Republic, Ethiopia and Ukraine as medical team leader. She went back to Haiti as Mission Specialised Activity Manager and then most recently as Sexual Violence Program Activity Manager, coming back just in September. Great to have you with us, Lisa.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for the introduction. Very exciting to be here and have this opportunity to speak to you all tonight.
And let me introduce Jennifer Craig. Jen started as a general logistician with MSF in Nigeria in 2016, followed by Tanzania, the Palestinian territories, and a couple of stints in Cambodia. We currently have the very good fortune to have Jen as a member of the recruitment team for MSF Australia. Wonderful to have you with us, Jen.
Lovely to be here as well. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, both. So, Lisa, let's kick off with hearing a little about how your career has evolved with MSF.
Yeah, for sure. So as Jackie mentioned, I joined MSF in 2010, and so I've been with the organisation for quite some time now, and so I have moved through a number of different stages in my career progression within the organisation. When I first started with MSF, it was quite some time ago now, and it's worth just keeping in mind that the recruitment process has changed. But I came into MSF as quite a junior doctor. I only had 2 years of experience working as a doctor in hospitals, and I didn't have I had no management experience when I first started with the organisation. And came in as a medical doctor for my first couple of assignments, and then started to get more interested in management and taking on that lead of the role of hospital clinical lead. And then in 2019, I completed the validation process as a medical team leader. So that's the person who's managing the whole medical team, both the international staff and the local staff. And then more recently, in the past few years, I started taking on more in a kind of gap fill capacity when there were shortages, taking on the role of project coordinator And just this year, I've been validated as a project coordinator, which is really exciting. So I'm moving more in the direction of operations now within MSF, which is, it's an interesting career trajectory, but I mean, there's so many options for careers within this organisation. And it's been a really interesting journey, and seeing this transition of how I have moved from medical more into operations and focusing on security management and project coordination. It's been a fantastic journey so far, and I'm looking forward to what the future holds actually in my career with MSF.
Yeah, fantastic, Lisa, and we'll explore it a little bit more. While we're just talking about the project coordinator role, though, it'd be really good just to elaborate a little bit more on just what that means with MSF, because it's quite a different role than is the usual project coordinator role that you hear about in Australia and New Zealand. Lisa, do you mind just telling us a little bit about what it looks like with MSF?
Yeah, absolutely. So the project coordinator role, you are the overall security responsible, and you're the overall manager at the project level. So it is very important coming into this role to have a really good background and understanding of MSF, because so many of the processes and so many of the protocols that we follow and the way that we operate is quite specific to the organisation. It's also a role with a lot of responsibility. We do have people coming into the organisation coming in more in a vertical way from other organisations. So but in that case, those people need to have quite a lot of experience in that project coordination and operations role working within comparable NGOs to be able to then transition over. And the other way that people work up into that role is starting either logistics or medical, it doesn't really matter, but starting somewhere in MSF and then working your way up from there. So it's a very challenging role. It's a very interesting role. You are overall security management for the project, as I said. So you're analysing the security, analysing the context, a lot of networking, a lot of building up relationships, negotiating humanitarian access and these sorts of things. Also responsible for all the human resources, all the people management stuff falls on the shoulders of the project coordinator or the PC. And there's also one of the other things that I really love about this role is that you are working in the project, so still working at project level and having that direct contact with the beneficiaries and working directly with the field team, the local staff and the international staff who are working within the project. But you also get to have quite a lot of input, and you're involved in a lot of discussions around strategy and global vision and what is the future of this project looking like, and troubleshooting and working together with the teams in the coordination, which is usually in the capital of whichever country we're working in, and also the team in the headquarters, in head office in my case in Amsterdam, but whichever section of MSF you're working within. So yeah, it's a great role. Great job.
Fantastic, Lisa. It doesn't sound like you get bored.
No.
Jen, just to further develop this project coordinator theme, could you tell us a little about the steps you've taken to reach and be prepared for the project coordinator role?
Look, absolutely. Similarly to Lisa, my career trajectory was mostly based around this idea of not saying no for opportunities. So I started with MSF in a logistics role in Nigeria in an emergency project, which is quite unusual for a first placement. And then before I left, they had a gap in an admin role in the capital. So I took that and I stayed for, I can't remember now, but I think it was about 6 weeks, filling an admin gap, but also working with the capital coordination, which was quite a different experience and quite a strong learning opportunity for me. Then from there, I moved to a different section, which also gave me a broader experience, and was again starting in a logistics role, then moved into a hospital facilitator role, and then facilities manager role, sorry. And then from there, I went to Cambodia. And in Cambodia, I started off as the log admin, and I was really lucky to have that opportunity. And it was partly built on the fact that I had had some MSF admin exposure previously. Now, in my career prior to MSF, I also had that exposure and I had that skill set. So you shouldn't think of MSF as a training ground from scratch. You're always expected to be able to walk into a role and be competent in it from the start, because often you are alone. But because I then had that exposure in an MSF capacity, I was then able to take a log admin position and move from that into a project coordination position. And so it was really just a matter of saying yes to every opportunity that was given for me, and then being able to build on those opportunities.
Thanks, Jen. And look, as you can see from both Lisa and Jen's experience, there are different entry points to a career with MSF. There's a lot of scope to cross over from a particular entry point to quite a different area of MSF, as we saw with in your case, Lisa, starting as a medical doctor and now firmly in an operations leadership role. You can also see from what we've said so far is that MSF needs both medical and non-medical professionals. The medical roles we particularly need right now include obstetricians, gynecologists, anaesthetists, surgeons and paediatricians. And on the non-medical side, we really need finance and human resource managers, logisticians, engineers, water and sanitation experts, among others. The best thing to do is to have a look on our website to really gain an understanding of both medical and non-medical roles in need. Keeping in mind that the needs overseas are changing often, and this will be reflected in the profiles in high demand. Lisa, I'd be really interested to hear from you about the significance training and development played in taking on those further assignments and, in effect, building a career with MSF.
Yeah, for sure. It continues to be a very steep learning curve, I would say, working with MSF. I've been lucky enough throughout my career with MSF to have benefited from a number of face-to-face trainings run by MSF. One of the ones that's been really instrumental in taking my career in quite a different direction was the French language training that I did in Brussels. So after I completed my first assignment with MSF, which was in Pakistan, working on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, as an obstetrician, actually, interestingly. And then MSF proposed to send me to the Democratic Republic of Congo to work there, running outreach mobile clinics. And French is the official language, or one of the official languages of this country. There's very little English spoken there. So I did have quite a strong background in French prior to going into this. So I studied French for 6 years during school, but then I didn't use it for quite a number of years in the interim. But it's very important to know that MSF will not train you from zero if you don't have that background in a certain language. So it is one thing that you can do to prepare yourself and to make yourself more useful to the organisation is learning and putting in that effort yourself to learn more languages. And the most useful languages with MSF and the places that we're working at the moment are French, Arabic and Spanish. So I obviously already had that background in French, which helped. And then I went to a 2-week intensive French course in Brussels. And since doing that course in Brussels, I have almost exclusively worked in the French-speaking world in MSF. So it's actually rare now for me to work in English-speaking contexts. And so I have put a lot of, it's not been an easy journey, but I put a lot of effort into really working on my French and getting it to a level where I can engage in those high level humanitarian negotiations that I mentioned and managing, difficult and sensitive human resources issues and that sort of thing. And just the terminology that we use within the organisation and also within the humanitarian space. So that's been very, very helpful for me, and I love it. I love working and living in French-speaking contexts.
It certainly opens up the opportunities for
absolutely
with MSF if you have that French. If you were just wondering about taking on a class, do go out and do it. It will make all the difference.
Yeah.
Jen, just moving to management again, you mentioned a training that you found particularly helpful. Could you tell us a little about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I move to that, though, I just wanted to add one thing about the French language. Lisa's absolutely right. MSF as an organisation, it does require people to have a level of basic French before they will fund in-depth immersion training. But MSF Australia as an office will also help support you to get you to that step. So we do have resources available to our field workers like Rosetta Stone. So if people are willing to learn French but they don't have that basic and are willing to commit to it, MSF Australia can also support them from a much earlier placement. But that's a little bit different. From a management perspective, though, one of the courses that I did when I was in the project in Cambodia was a training course called Field Management Training, and it's one that we are offering more and more at a project level to both international and locally recruited staff. And we do it because we recognise how much value there is for the organisation in developing those managerial skills. Now, I came from a very strong management background before I entered MSF, and this training, it wasn't groundbreaking for me, but it was an excellent refresher, and it gave me that opportunity while in a project to take a step back and to look at what I knew theoretically and how I was applying it at that point in my career, and to sort of have those conversations with myself and readjust my practices. So it was an excellent refresher, and it also gave me a really good cultural understanding of a lot of my colleagues and how they viewed management and how they viewed HR issues within the project. And so that was an incredibly valuable experience. And it sort of plays on this point that I was making before about how a career with MSF, it's so much of it is just about saying yes to opportunities, and any training opportunity that's offered to you, even if you feel like it's going to be more a refresher than anything else, take it and learn whatever you can from it, even if it's just that it gives you that moment in time to really reflect on what you're currently doing. That's incredibly valuable and so rare in a busy project.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. And look, we've been talking a lot about building a career with MSF, but I just want to acknowledge that this pathway is not for everyone. And we do have quite some medical specialists as well as non-medical professionals who make a personal commitment to work with MSF for a short period, every 1 or 2 or 3 years, depending on our needs at the time in projects, and it does depend on your particular profession. An example might be an anaesthetist or water sanitation expert who takes leave from their career in Australia or New Zealand to go every few years to work overseas with us. And some of the professionals in our pool do this semi-regularly, and it just makes such a huge contribution to MSF, having this long-term commitment, this long-term relationship with our international staff. They build their knowledge and competency, and Lisa's referred to this already, in particular contexts. And with each MSF assignment, that knowledge and competency builds. And we hear regularly from international staff that experience also contributes to their professional growth at home in Australia and New Zealand. Jen, while we're talking about this, could you add a little bit more on just why these different types of commitment, either building a career or just being committed to MSF every year or two? Why is it so important to MSF?
Absolutely. For me, from a recruitment perspective, there are basically 3 types of candidate that we sort of look for. So either people who are interested in developing a career with MSF and moving into a coordination position, be it a medical coordination position or a project coordination position, sort of more operational or more medical, it's growing into those coordination positions, or a particular pool of specialists who might be willing to go for 6 to 8 weeks every year or every second year, but they are very, very specific roles. They're not something that's open to everybody, or people who just love their job and just want to do their job. So, maybe we have an electrician who loves being an electrician, doesn't have an interest in moving into coordination, and just wants to go every year, come back to Australia for a couple of months in between maybe, or a year in between, and then go again and always stay in that same role. That's also valuable to us. Now, the reason that we look for this commitment, though, is that, as we've sort of alluded to, these first couple of assignments are quite a learning curve. And so it's quite normal to feel very overwhelmed and very out of your depth in your first 1 or 2 assignments as you learn the way that MSF works. And it doesn't matter if you've had 5 years experience or 25 years experience. If you're a sort of an entry-level logistics manager or a surgeon who's been practicing medicine in Australia for 30 years, you're still going to have a learning curve when it comes to applying your skill set to the way that MSF works and the MSF structures. And so we need people to make a longer term commitment so that they're of value to the organisation, because one of the things that we always need to be aware of, and we need people who work for MSF to be aware of, is that we are not a for-profit organisation. We are using donor money, and so we put a lot of money and a lot of investment and a lot of time into placing people in those first couple of assignments, and we want to see that repaid, ideally, in more assignments in the future.
Thanks, Jen. And look, just to come back to the training again, MSF does offer a learning-centred space known as Tembo, and this provides digital learning and development opportunities. It has over 900 courses and resources available, and it's constantly evolving. It's a veritable treasure trove of learning. And as you've heard already, courses range from language to technical to management. And I would like to say that while global training opportunities can be quite competitive and not so easy to gain a place in them, MSF Australia offers a dedicated budget, and Jen referred to this earlier with languages. We have a dedicated budget per international staff person to support their career development or to address skill gaps. And this is available for those committed to multiple assignments. And to make this all happen, our career managers have professional development plans for each staff person. I'd like to move now just to talking about mentoring and coaching. And in the first instance, Jen, if you could just talk a little about when you accessed a mentor when you first became a project coordinator.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in Cambodia, as I mentioned earlier, I was given this opportunity to grow into the project coordinator position. And it was a new position to me. I'd already been in the project for a while, which was wonderful because it meant that I didn't have to also learn the project at the same time as learning the nuances of a new role. But it was a new role and it was challenging. And I came across an advertisement on one of our internal sites for a mentor program that MSF was running. And I thought, oh, that sounds quite good, actually. And I had myself matched with a lovely mentor who was a French man who had a lot of experience in project coordination, but wasn't currently working in a project and certainly wasn't in my project. And so it gave me the space to be able to have conversations about the sort of dilemmas that I was having on a day-to-day basis, difficult questions that might have come up, how to handle some tricky situations, and to be able to ask some really silly questions without worrying about how silly they sounded. And that was it was really valuable. And it's incredible that MSF sort of has these tools available to really help you succeed in your position. And sometimes you do have to advocate a little bit for them for yourself. Like I was the one that found the mentor program and went, oh, actually, I think that would be useful for me. But they are there when you look for them. And it really helped me grow in my confidence as a project coordinator, and I think really contributed to me being successful in the position.
That's great to know, Jen. And I think coaching would be another one. Lisa, would you say?
Yeah, coaching is another learning method and a way to increase your skills and your knowledge and all of that sort of thing. Coaching is a method that we use a lot in MSF. It's often done in a less formal way than the mentoring programs, and it's usually with people that you're there in the project with. So it's often, for me, the people who have been the best coaches during my career development have been my direct supervisors. So when I was in the role of medical team leader, it's often the medical coordinator coordinator, or if I'm in the role of project coordinator, it might be the head of mission, who I'm getting that coaching from. So it's basically just making sure that you are, you have somebody there who you can ask questions and you can find some time to sit together, ideally on a weekly basis or something like that, and go through any difficult situations and go through anything that you're struggling with, or asking questions and getting support from them. Coaching is also a technique that I use a lot to support other people growing into their roles. So whether it's international staff or locally recruited staff, especially if people are newer to the organisation or newer to the role that they're working in, then I will employ some coaching strategies to help them grow and develop into their roles as well. So I find it to be a very valuable tool and something that I've benefited from, and also that I use a lot, when helping other people.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And it is important just to keep in mind that while we do invest in training and development, MSF's not an entry point organisation. We expect candidates, as Jen mentioned a little earlier, we expect candidates to have significant experience in their profession as well as management experience. We're looking for people able to hit the ground running. There are a lot of opportunities with MSF, whichever pathway you take, whether it be the career, the long-term career, or the commitment we've talked about. And the pathway will emerge as you gain experience in the MSF projects. What we're really hoping for, though, is you have that intent for a longer-term commitment. And before applying for a position with MSF, we really encourage you to go to our website and watch the recent Insider Tips webinar that we did, and that really provides a lot of information on the essential criteria, what we're looking for. And below this event, you will see a guide that will help you with your presentation of your CV for MSF. I hope that what you've gained tonight is that we're really looking for people in relevant medical and non-medical professions who want to build that career or that longer-term commitment where they fit MSF into their career at home. We will need to move to our audience questions shortly, but could I just ask you both, why is this longer-term commitment or career with MSF rewarding? And if we can start with you, Lisa.
Yeah, for sure. I have just found it to be the most incredibly rewarding journey. This career that I started what feels like a long time ago now with MSF, and I don't think I'm anywhere near the end of it. I'm looking forward to how my career is going to progress and continue over the years to come. So it has been very rewarding, and I think you will be faced with challenges in working with MSF. You will encounter situations that you couldn't even imagine in your wildest dreams, and you will figure out ways to solve problems, and you will do things that you maybe didn't think that you were capable of. And I think there's a huge value in that, in terms of personal development, but also in terms of gaining those skills to be more useful to the organisation. And as we say, MSF is not an entry-level organisation. We do want people to come in with a lot of experience, but understanding that it will be a steep learning curve because there is so much to learn about the organisation, and so much of what we do is quite specific, especially to the humanitarian space. There's definitely crossover as well. And I think for me, I came into MSF with zero management experience, which is, very different to Jen's situation. So all of the management training and experience that I have now developed has been through my work with MSF, and I've been able to carry that through into other areas of my life, which has also been very valuable for me. And I'm at a point now with my career with MSF where I can now walk into a very complex humanitarian crisis. Even right at the beginning of a humanitarian crisis, I can arrive in a place and maybe there's not even a project set up yet, or there is a project, and I can very quickly evaluate what are the needs, where are the priorities, what do we need to do to make this work possible and to make this work happen, and what work needs to be done, what are the biggest needs of this population that's in distress. And I think that's something that I've developed over many years of working with the organisation, and now means that I'm quite a valuable and useful member of the team.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. That experience just makes all the difference. Jen, what would you add to that? What's your experience been in terms of why you keep coming back, I guess.
Look, I genuinely think that the role of project coordinator will be the best job that I ever have in my life. It's such an incredible position to hold. You have access to so much information and you learn so much on a daily basis, but also on a project basis. So it's never the same. It's not the same as having a career where you turn up every day and you do more or less the same job, and you might deal with problems and you might deal with slight variances on cases or on presentations, but it can be radically different every day. You know, you might be going from working with a refugee in a refugee camp to working on a malnutrition project to working on a mental health project. My last project was a mental health project in Palestine, and it was a massive learning curve. I had to learn how to manage a project where I couldn't necessarily see what was going on, and that was an incredible thing to learn how to do. And so every day is different, and if you thrive on that challenge and that variation, then it's a wonderfully rewarding career. And it used to be that maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, people would do 1 or 2 contracts with MSF and then they would go back to their life. But it really has become an organisation that people stay with in the long term now. So we try to make that as valuable an experience for people and give them the opportunities to develop where they would like to develop, both so that they are interested, but also so the organisation benefits the most from their capacity. But if you're thinking about it, if you're the sort of person who thrives on challenge and enjoys learning about new places, new cultures, new people, new situations, if you are really good at managing uncertainty, then it's a wonderful career, and it's not the sort of career that you have many other opportunities to engage in. So I would recommend it to anybody that enjoys this sort of work, because I don't necessarily think that it is something that everybody would love, but if you do, there's nothing better.
We can promise you won't be bored.
Definitely.
Look, there's so much more we could talk about on this. However, we do have some great questions coming in from our audience. Lisa, I would like to ask you on behalf of Neil, how do you manage to maintain your medical registration in Australia alongside your MSF career?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Jackie, and it's one that it took me a long time to really get to the bottom of and figure out. So I'm very happy to impart what I have learned about this for all of you. So in terms of medical registration, I can only speak for doctors. I haven't done, the same or similar probably applies to other medical professionals, but in terms of just doctors, there is a requirement to do a certain amount of work, medical work per year, or for some, it depends on what your specialty is, but a lot of the colleges now work on a 3-year cycle. So for my college, I'm with the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners, and the requirement is 3 months of like full-time equivalent work every 3 years. But that doesn't have to be done in Australia. So the work that I do with MSF does count towards that registration. And so I'm actually able to maintain my recency of practice requirements through the work that I do with MSF, as long as it's work in the medical field. So the work that I do as a project coordinator doesn't count because that's operations. But if you're working in the medical field, including medical administration, then that does count towards that. But I mean, if you are a doctor or a health professional working within the organisation, there's other ways to do it. I mean, a lot of us do come back to Australia or New Zealand or to our home country in between missions. And so there's opportunities there. Like I work with a locum agency when I'm with Australia. So I'm doing a little bit of work, just gap filling in general practice clinics around Australia when I'm not with MSF. So that's another way that I get my recency of practice hours up.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful, Lisa. I have a question from Kirsty. And Kirsty's asking, what assignments, locations do you often send nursing staff to? And look, this really depends on a number of factors, including the needs of the projects and your skills, experience, and language competence, as we've talked about earlier. We don't recruit for a specific job or country. That's really important to know. We recruit people who meet our criteria, and then we will try and find you an appropriate position. When you're applying to MSF Australia, you're applying to Médecins Sans Frontières generally. There's no choosing a part of the world to go to. We're hoping you're applying to the organisation. To give you an idea, the top 5 countries we sent staff to in 2023 were Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Yemen, Palestinian territories, and South Sudan. Now I've got another question here from Fatah Saleh on YouTube. Thank you. She says, I'm a medical doctor in Malaysia. I have 10 years clinical experience. I'd like to explore the opportunity to serve those in Gaza in wake of the current humanitarian crisis. And I have Arabic. So look, we don't recruit, as I just said, for specific contexts. We recruit based on MSF needs on each project. So if you're interested in applying, please apply for MSF, and then we will see where you are the best fit for the needs that we have. Lisa, I have a question for you. How have you managed to adapt your clinical work to the low resource settings?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in the beginning, it was incredibly challenging, I have to say, coming from a medical background where I did my training and my first years of work in Australia, where we have so many resources, really. It's a very, very different world. And then you step away from that into a context where, and a lot of the medical work that I do with MSF is mobile clinics and outreach programs. So I'm really literally working in a mud hut with no electricity. And, you know, we might only be treating very simple things like diarrhea, pneumonia, and malaria, and it's all protocols-based stuff. We often have access to rapid tests, but we don't have any other laboratory testing, and we don't have any access to even simple x-rays or any other imaging a lot of the time. So it can be very challenging. I have to say the organisation, MSF, has such fantastic protocols for working within these low resource settings, and so much of the medical work that we do is protocols driven. So a lot of the time it's actually a case of don't overthink it too much. Go back to the protocols, and to this day I still do. I will have more junior doctors coming to me with specific clinical questions, and I will say to them, "What does the protocol say? Have you looked at the protocols?" And if they haven't, then I'll help them to. We have an app that I can help them download onto their smartphone, or we always have hard copy books of our protocols around, and so we just rely very heavily on those. Obviously very context specific, and we do have projects where we're doing much higher level medical care. For example, in Jordan, we have a hospital where we're providing quite advanced treatment for people, particularly people that have lost limbs and people that need very complex orthopedic surgery and that sort of thing. So that's a very different situation. And yeah, it's always very adaptable, but you will be taking the lead from your medical coordinator, from your medical team leader, and always coming back to the protocols.
Thanks, Lisa. Really important to know. You'll find them everywhere, those protocols. They're the basic thing that we rely on. Now I've got a question from Maria. She's saying she has experience in project management in an international development, but not humanitarian context. And she'd like to explore this opportunity, but she can only commit to 3 to 6 months assignment at this point of time. And is this a possibility? And look, I'm sorry, but we require a minimum period of availability as per our recruitment criteria. So the answer would be no. And just moving through the questions, because I really appreciate this. We've got a lot tonight. It's fantastic. Natalia.
Can I add a point on that, Jackie, just quickly?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to add in, yeah, we do require, MSF requires a longer commitment, particularly for your first assignment. But it sometimes is the case that once you gain more experience with the organisation, that you can potentially have shorter assignments. So I'm currently doing around 6 months every year, and that might be 1 6-month assignment, or it might be 2 3-month assignments. But when I first started with the organisation, I was doing more like 9-month assignments. So yeah, we do require those longer term commitments, at least in the beginning. And part of the reason for that is, as Jen described very well before, the learning curve is so steep. And when you first start with the organisation, you will spend your first month or even 2 months just learning about how everything works, and learning the protocols and learning about how everything operates and getting to know MSF, basically. And so the time that you're really able to be effective is not that long. Yeah.
And actually, the feedback has been that people who do the longer projects actually get more out of it. They're much more rewarding.
Absolutely.
And can I add one extra thing, Jackie, just to touch on that? Where MSF is perhaps a little bit unusual from a recruitment perspective is that our essential criteria are essential. It's not like looking at a job on Seek and going, oh, well, I've got 80% of that, then that's an excellent candidate. Because we recruit for a pool system, we actually do look for people that meet all of the essential criteria. So when people make their application, it's really important that they look at the essential criteria both for their role and the essential criteria for all project workers, and that they make sure that they address all of them in their application, because they really do have to meet all of them.
And because of the demanding nature of the roles, that is the reason why we just have to be really, we've got quite a high bar to entry, and that essential criteria is an excellent place to start and look, and just to take that really seriously. And as Jen says, if you don't have a key area, to look at addressing that before you apply. Now, just to move to a question from Natalia. You mentioned the need for a long-term dedication to work with MSF. Are there opportunities available for couples, say parents, as well, and in particular for non-medical positions such as a logistician? And I'm very sorry, but Natalia, no, all posts for first-time staff are unaccompanied. Most placement locations don't allow for friends or family members to visit. And, we've heard, I gave these examples of the 5 countries where we're mostly sending people, and that will give you a sense of why they're emergency contexts. And so it's not a secure place to have a family posting. I would say, though, that accompanied posts may occasionally, very occasionally, be offered to experienced international staff, depending on field needs. And in a context where it is safe to do so. And Maria, I'd add that the reason is that it takes time to make connections in the context. I've just got...
in relation to the project coordination question, and
I see.
I was just adding that. One of the reasons that we look for a longer term commitment, Lisa did sort of address this as well, is that it takes time. So if you turn up as a project coordinator, you need to develop working relationships with local government and other organisations. And if you're going to be there for 3 months, it just isn't possible. We do often look for longer term commitments for those roles.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is for our local colleagues, if we have international people coming into the project, every 3 months there's that turnover, it takes a real toll on the people who live and work there, training you up, frankly, and getting you used to the role, and then you leave again before you've really had a chance to make a substantial contribution. So that's why we really encourage you to have that longer term. Take that longer term position. Now on YouTube, I have a question for you, Lisa, from Diva. She's saying, Hi, Dr. Lisa. Could you please tell me what could be my trajectory with MSF if I'm a doctor?
Yeah, sure.
It's quite a broad one for you, Lisa.
It is a broad one. It is a broad one, but I can definitely address that. I think it's a very good question. Because it can go in so many different directions. So if you're coming into MSF, into the organisation with a medical background as a medical doctor, you may be doing specialist training, in which case, like we mentioned, we need anaesthetists, we need obstetricians, gynecologists. So that might be the way that you work with the organisation. Or you might instead go in the direction of medical management, which is also very valuable. And that's the more the direction that I went in, rather than going into technical specialised medicine. I went in the direction of medical management, so moving up into the role of medical team leader, and then if you're continuing in that direction, eventually medical coordinator, who's based usually in the capital of the country that we're working in. So yeah, I guess those are the broad options. It's an interesting one as well, because we've touched on a little bit how much we rely on and how much we need and how much we appreciate our locally recruited staff. And if we are working in a country where there are doctors available, we prefer that the clinical work is done by locally recruited doctors rather than bringing in international doctors. There's a whole lot of reasons for that. They have they already have the knowledge and experience to treat the diseases that we are seeing in that particular project. They speak the local language, they have the local knowledge and all of this sort of thing. So for those kind of positions, for those really clinical roles, we're often filling those roles with locally recruited staff, and international staff coming in most cases. There are exceptions to this, but in most cases you will be going either in that more highly specialised medical direction or in the direction of the medical management. There are, as I said, there are exceptions, and I've worked a bit in the Central African Republic, where the number of doctors in the whole country per capita is so ridiculously low that we cannot recruit doctors locally. So whenever we open a recruitment, we don't find Central African doctors, and so we are bringing in that instance international doctors to do the clinical work. But that doesn't happen in many of the countries that we work in.
No, it really doesn't, and unfortunately, we're really not able to place many doctors from MSF Australia now. That's why we're really emphasising not only the management experience, but also that language experience, because they would be the only pathways for doctors for us recruiting at the moment. Jen, did you want to add anything to that on that note? Does that sound okay? Great. Okay, and Gemma is asking, actually for you, Jen, do the salaries vary depending on location and the position?
Not depending on the location, but the position, it does start to change a little bit. So as you become more senior and move up levels, then there is a difference. And there can also, correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie, I think this is still, we just had a big readjustment of how we do salaries, but I think this is still accurate. As you gain more experience at your current level, you also go up in salary, I believe. So there are some changes, but not based on location. Now, the other side of that, sorry. Look, now the other thing about it, with based on location, your salary doesn't change, but the amount that you're given on the ground as a per diem might change. So your sort of per diem is to cover your food, your cost of living when you're actually on the ground in the project, and that is determined by the cost of living in the country.
Yeah, fantastic. So you don't actually need to spend while you're in the project. Your
very rarely
will cover your daily, your basic needs there.
I think I'd just add on to that. We use a grid. We use a function grid to calculate salaries within the organisation, and that grid is across the board. So that grid covers medical and non-medical professionals. And if you're working at a certain level, then you will be, you'll be in line with people working in similar areas. So it's not the case that doctors are making more money than logisticians or anything like that, which is actually one of the things I really appreciate about the organisation, that I feel like it's a very fair salary grid, and the way that it's calculated is done in as fair a way as possible.
Yeah, that equity is really important for the organisation.
Yeah.
Jen, there's a technical question for you. Services. So in countries wherever you're placed, do you need to look for your own accommodation, or does MSF help you with that?
MSF supplies the accommodation. So what's most common, especially at a project level, is that and this isn't always true, but the most common setup is that you will be in a shared guest house, and you will be living with the rest of the internationally recruited team, and you will hopefully have your own bedroom, but you may not, depending on the conditions. But you'd be expecting that you would be sharing bathroom facilities, that there would be one kitchen and usually a cook. And we would normally, so a normal setup with an MSF project is that there's a guest house, there are cooks, there are cleaners, people ideally have their own bedroom, but maybe sharing, and all other facilities are shared. And you are expected to live there. It's not an opt-out arrangement, and part of that is due to security constraints. So it's important that people are together as a group.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jen. Ferry has asked if there's an age limit for applying, and thanks for your question, Ferry. Look, no, MSF doesn't discriminate on the grounds of age. However, international staff do need to have the physical and mental fitness to cope with the demanding conditions that may be encountered on assignment. And another question here for you, Jen. What was your background starting in a logistics role? What specialisation would you recommend taking a course in? The person asking, Irene, thank you, has expedition and project management experience, but not enough at the moment, she thinks.
So it might be worth looking at the previous webinar that we did, because I went into this in a little bit more detail then, and I think Jackie has spoken about the link to the previous webinar as well. Look, my trajectory, I studied law, and I didn't want to be a lawyer, so I leapt off and jumped through working holiday visas in Europe, did a whole lot of different management, different countries, different cultures, different contexts, and was slowly sort of building this depth of knowledge of management within different cultures. And then I actually started running overland tours. So that put me into a lot of Central Asia, Russia, China, Mongolia, and gave me a sort of the experience of managing under uncertainty, managing crises as they arose, being in quite uncomfortable positions, having to think on my feet, and all of these things were invaluable to MSF. But then I didn't actually enter the humanitarian landscape immediately with MSF. And this is something that people can also think of. So if you look at your experience and you look at our essential criteria, you kind of go, oh, I don't know if I really meet this. You know, there are other doors open to people. Things like Australian Volunteers International can give really good experience in this sort of sector that then gives you a much stronger application with MSF as an organisation. So I worked for a different NGO in logistics, and I did one contract with them, and then very deliberately chose to apply for MSF in a logistics role. But the other thing, I believe that she also asked about specialisation and recommendations of courses. Things like supply is really useful. Things like warehousing. I mean, unless you want to go out and actually get a trade, like become an electrician or a builder, then you're looking at more sort of general logistics skill sets, which are things more like supply. But then you want to have that experience in low resource settings as well. And that's where looking at other opportunities can also be a valuable entry path.
Right, thanks. Thanks very much, Jen. Lisa, I've got a last question for you. Mary's asking what your most enjoyable experience was with or has been so far with MSF, and could you tell us why?
Wow, what a great question. I just read that question on the screen and my memory is just gone, woof, so many amazing experiences just flooding through my mind right now. So it's difficult to pick just one, I guess. I absolutely love my life and my career with MSF. And I like genuinely love the work that I do, and I love how I'm challenged all of the time, and how I draw on my skills and my experience, and I get through these difficult situations. I really love that. To give a more concrete example, which also comes back to the value and the importance in long-term career with MSF. I have been working with sexual and gender-based violence survivors in Haiti since 2015. So I've done 3 assignments in Haiti, and I've come back to the same project and to the same place in Haiti. And so I've had an opportunity in Haiti to actually be part of the dialogue around improving access to care for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. So with the 3 assignments that I've done there, I've had the opportunity to really build up these connections and relationships, as Jen was mentioning, with a lot of the other organisations and other actors that are working in that field. And I think it's now more than 8 years that I've been working in Haiti, I have seen the care that's available for survivors has increased dramatically, and that's through the work that MSF is doing there, and it's been really beautiful to see, and to have been part of that, and to setting up a clinic, and then to setting up a training unit. So all of that work has been really valuable, and I actually hope that I get to continue doing that. I don't want to go there for every assignment, but every couple of years going back to Haiti is something that I really love.
Well, that sounds like a plan, Lisa. Jen, just for your last one, could you tell us about your most enjoyable experience with MSF?
Absolutely. Now, I joined MSF because I wanted to work in emergencies and conflict zones and that sort of high adrenaline sort of logistics work. And that was what I wanted to do. And it's one of the reasons I joined MSF. And much to my surprise, my favourite project was Cambodia, which was a very secure context. But what it was we were running a Hep C project in Cambodia, and we were looking to show a model of screening and treatment for hepatitis C in low resource settings. And it was incredible. It was incredibly data heavy, which really appealed to my inner nerd, and really rewarding, because what you were doing was then able to be implemented in other contexts, in other countries. The Cambodian government were then able to pick it up and implement it in other areas within Cambodia. And the treatment that we were offering with the new drugs available was life-changing for people. So it was just this incredibly rewarding project to be involved in. And I had no idea that was going to be what I loved about MSF. And I would say to people that this is another reason you don't say no to opportunities, because it's not the project that you go into MSF thinking is going to be your favourite that ends up being your favourite.
Yeah, it's so often the case. We hear that again and again. So if you have the opportunity, please take it. Now, unfortunately, we've run out of time. So I'd really like to thank you all for being with us tonight, for your very thoughtful questions. We will send you a follow-up email with links to the criteria and how to apply. Remember, working for MSF is a commitment, not just an adventure. Whether you're interested in a career or a specialist role, we have a lot of opportunities for those dedicated to making a difference. We so hope it's been useful and look forward to seeing your applications. I'd like to say a very big thank you to our amazing panellists, Lisa and Jen.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jackie. And thank you everybody for attending tonight.
Thanks, Jackie. And I hope that this was useful for people.
Thanks both. Thanks everybody. Have a good evening.